This week, we are going to be talking about accessibility and disability in gaming. So there will probably be a lot of commentary that parallels with society at large, because so many issues that the gaming industry face are also shared by wider society. The message that society tends to send to anyone who isn't a cisgender, straight, white, able-bodied man with no illnesses whatsoever is that you don't belong here. This is not a space that belongs to you. And we add that into capitalism as well, that says if you can't work a 9-to-5 job, then you're essentially a drain on society and you're worthless. I wrote down that sometimes you can feel like a dead weight on society. It's terrible for your self-esteem, terrible for your self-worth. And yeah, as the gaming industry, it's not exempt. We've talked about this a lot. It's not exempt from any of the problems of society. So the first thing I wanted to talk with us about is the idea of, do you feel that games give you a sense that you belong? Either as, so I know some of us identify as having some sort of disability or mental illness. I have depression and anxiety and chronic pain. I was wondering if Alex, maybe to go first, do you feel like gaming is a space where the message is you belong?
I think certainly I do feel like that in a lot of ways, but I think looking back on how I felt in childhood, gaming was a way to not necessarily escape my disabled life, but it was to experience things without having to worry about my disability and how discrimination against me was impacting my day-to-day, or barriers in society were impacting my day-to-day. And obviously a lot of that has taken a long time to realise, because I only recently learned about the social model of disability, which is something that explains disability in a way that it's like something that society does to people. So you are disabled by society because of the barriers that are put in your way, whether they be physical, attitudinal, organisational, informational, etc. And it's not that the disability is the fault of the person, which you might have heard as the medical model of disability, which assumes that disability is a person's problem, that they need to be fixed, and that it's their issue to deal with and no one else's. So in a sense, I used gaming to kind of put my disability to one side and not have to think about it. So in that sense, I did feel like it was somewhere that I could belong, because I just put that part of myself to the side. But now, obviously, I think about myself differently, and I'm a lot more accepting of my disability as it being a part of me, because I know about the social model. And I think there is probably, I'm not represented one for one within gaming spaces, but yeah, I still feel like obviously it's a happy place for me to go, but I don't think disability is represented in the same way as other people are in games.
Yeah, because we mentioned before that if it's not like many things with women as well, if it's either not represented at all, or when there's rare times that it is represented, it's not always a good thing. It's not always represented in a healthy way. So like people with scars and deformities are still often that's a marker that they're evil, or there's something wrong with them. So I think Caroline, you and I, we've both talked about we have depression and anxiety. Do you feel like gaming is a space where you can exist as a whole? Because illnesses are a part of you. They're not something that is bolted on and that you should view as an enemy. They're just part of your experience of life. Do you feel like you can exist in your gaming spaces with all parts of you?
Yeah, and I think there is, I think in some ways that the gaming is more of a space for people with mental health issues than it is for people with physical disabilities. I think it is more forgiving as a community in many ways, because for so many people, Not that it couldn't be for people who have physical disability problems, but it is more because the games, consoles, etc., are so inaccessible. There are so many barriers that exist. Whereas for people where it's mental health, it's somewhere that you can escape to. It's somewhere that you can easily use that space to explore your emotions almost. I think you've spoken about this a bit, about that, having a space to explore those darker thoughts, those different behaviors as well and stuff like that. And I think that for me, it's always been somewhere where we talked actually last episode, 2 weeks ago, about how there are some nice gaming communities. And I think actually talking about your dark thoughts, your dark days, not having good days, not being able to cope is something that I've often found gaming communities are surprisingly good at and surprisingly supportive of, because there is a lot of people there who really do use it as a way to shut off from the world. And somehow that distance of a screen, that distance of typing on a screen or over a voice chat or just talking to a total stranger, because sometimes talking to a total stranger about your mental health is actually easier than talking to people you know. And I think sometimes the gaming community can create amazingly supportive spaces for that. I'm not as much into story games, as you guys know, and I know that sometimes the representations of mental health in story games is appalling and frankly horrifying, and the glamorization of addiction and all this sort of nonsense. I don't think the story games get it right, but I think the communities that exist in gaming communities actually are surprisingly supportive sometimes of mental health.
Yeah, I had a thought that was in response to what you were saying, probably because there are probably 5 shots of vodka that I had, so I forgot it instantly. So, and I wanted to, but I digress. The other thing that I wanted to respond to is that you said that there are communities where you can go into and they're supportive. Jen, you've said that there were times where you think you spent more time in a gaming world than you were out in the real world. And I was wondering if, is that because you felt safe there? Is it just it felt better than real world? Did it feel like it was a place where you as yourself could be welcome? Is that what you were using it for?
Yeah, I think I've used gaming and the escape of gaming as for many reasons over the years, actually. So yeah, I mean, I think it became an environment where my friends were. So that's where I went to hang out with my friends. So instead of going and hanging out down the pub on a Friday night, I'd go on and game on a Friday night, because that's where I would talk to my friends, find out how their week had gone, download my week. And I was at uni, and then later I was working. So it's not like I wasn't having a real life outside of this gaming world, but I was also going to this gaming world. This was where I hung out with my friends. So for me, it was definitely an environment to engage with a group of friends who I was meeting from all over the world. And I think also it was a space where I felt more able to explore different aspects of myself. And I think that over time, a lot of what was going on in my sort of real world bled into my online world. So it wasn't a pure escape. It's not, you can't, they're not two completely different separate bubbles, I think. And maybe if you have your spare time and you go away and you do this, it can be more of a bubble. But when it becomes so fused with your day-to-day life, as my gaming experience did at points in my life, I'm not sure that I think that the two bled into each other quite a lot. So there was a lot of crossover going on and all sorts of interesting things. It sounds a lot more exciting than it actually was, but yeah. So I think, yes, I definitely used it as a space where I felt more relaxed and felt more comfortable, but it wasn't always an escape, and it wasn't always a positive.
One thing that I'm finding increasingly positive about this space that we've created, and something I'm trying to do in my life, is to be able to be my one authentic self everywhere I go. And from the sounds of it, that's what you were trying to do with your gaming, being in that world. You don't be one person in the real world and be another person in your gaming world, another person at your job. That's what so many people do. They just change who they are depending on the situation they're in, because that's what society pressures them to do. So that's what I hope that gaming should offer to everyone.